Have you ever noticed something strange? About 30-40 minutes after you eat a sandwich or some pasta, your brain feels like it's slowing down, your thoughts get fuzzy, you want to close your laptop and lie down. They tell us blood is rushing to your stomach. But let's be honest, do you actually believe that? Stick around. This conversation will change what you put on your plate tonight. You've heard it since childhood. Bread is the staff of life. That's in American school cafeterias, where they serve pizza made with white flour and sweetened milk for lunch. That's in Subway commercials airing between Super Bowl quarters. That's in the official USDA and FDA guidelines, where brains sit at the base of the food pyramid. But if you set aside the emotions and just look at the numbers, the picture gets unusual. More than that, it gets disturbing. Ask yourself a simple question. If bread is so healthy, why does it so often make you want to take a nap instead of run a marathon? Ancient texts tell a different story about lifespan. Pick any old source, the Bible, the Sumerian king list, the Indian Vedas. In those texts, people live for hundreds of years. Methuselah, 969 years. Noah, 950. Adam, 930. Mainstream science says, translation error, lunar cycles, mythological exaggeration. But why would ancient peoples, who calculated the stars with precision, built megaliths accurate to the millimeter, and created functioning calendars, get the ages of their own rulers wrong? Let's assume, just for a minute, that it's not a mistake, that it's a record of the biological norm back then. Now look at the lifespan graph. The steep drop coincides with one event, the shift to large-scale grain farming and a sedentary lifestyle, from 900 years down to a miserable 70 or 80 at best. Do you call that progress? Progress that cut human life tenfold? It's like building a car designed for 1,000,000 miles, and fueling it with something that kills the engine at 60,000, and calling that an upgrade. Official history says agriculture was a blessing. But what if it was the biggest diversion in human history? In older cities across the US South, Europe, and Asia, you see buildings with 15-foot ceilings and door handles at chest level. In Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, dozens of them. The official explanation: status, ventilation, aesthetics, aristocrats showing off their wealth. But let's think like engineers. Heating a room with 15-foot ceilings in a Minnesota or Maine winter, using primitive wood stoves, is a logistical nightmare. Warm air collects up near the ceiling, while people down below freeze. That's not just inconvenient, it defies physics and common sense. Why burn 3 times as much firewood when you could just build 8-foot ceilings? What if those buildings were made for people of a different height, people 8 to 10 feet tall? And what if the diet changed precisely so that new generations wouldn't grow that tall anymore? Have you ever noticed the steps on old staircases? They're often uncomfortable for modern people, either too high or too low, forcing you to shuffle or take awkwardly large strides. A small detail, or a sign that the people who lived there once had a different stride. Gluten is not a harmless protein. The word gluten comes from the Latin for glue, not a metaphor, a literal description of its function. When you eat a soft roll or a plate of spaghetti, you're introducing a substance into your body that human enzymes cannot fully break down. It coats the walls of your small intestine, and over time the microvilli, the tiny projections that absorb nutrients, stop working. They flatten out, like an old carpet that's been walked on too long. You eat more, but your cells starve. Your body demands more food because it can't extract what you already eat. That's one reason you can eat a whole pizza and feel hungry again an hour later. It's not greed. It's a mechanical failure to absorb. Then it gets more interesting and scarier. The gluten molecule is structurally similar to thyroid tissue and parts of the nervous system. Your immune system attacks a foreign gluten protein, and sometimes, by mistake, it attacks your own organs. Autoimmune diseases, type 2 diabetes, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis. These aren't always about age or genetics. Sometimes they're the price of eating a certain food daily for years, a food that only became a dietary staple a few thousand years ago, and in its modern, genetically modified version, only a few decades. Why modern bread doesn't go stale. Look at bread from an ordinary American supermarket, Walmart, Kroger, Safeway. It can sit on your counter for a week and not mold. It doesn't go stale. No green fuzz. That's not magic. It's not some smiling food scientist's happy achievement. It's thermophilic yeast, strains of Saccharomyces, bred on an industrial scale in the mid-20th century. Manufacturers assure you it dies during baking. But in the center of a soft loaf, a brioche, a burger bun, the temperature often doesn't get high enough. The spores of these fungi can survive extreme conditions. Once they land in the warm, moist environment of your gut, 37 degrees Celsius, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, they don't die. They keep living. They keep fermenting. There's a medical term, Brewery syndrome, a rare condition where a person gets drunk without drinking alcohol because yeast in their gut is turning carbohydrates into ethanol. Here's the question no one asks. What if a mild chronic version of this is happening to millions of people every single day? You notice how an hour after eating bread, you want more bread. That's not you wanting it. That's the colony inside you demanding another dose of sugar and starch to keep the party going. Yeast and your hormones. Here's another fact dietitians and doctors rarely mention. A diet rich in fast carbs and industrial yeast speeds up puberty. In the U.S. South, the average age of first menstruation dropped from 17 in the mid-19th century to 12 today, and in some ethnic groups, 10 or 11. They tell us, better nutrition. But biology has a harsh rule. Fast maturation almost always means a short life. Here's an example you can see with your own eyes. A broiler chicken raised on grain and additives grows many times faster than a wild forest bird. But it lives months, not years. Its body runs on overdrive from week 1. A grain-fed cow gives lots of milk but lives 5, 7 years instead of its natural 20. We did that to animals. Now take an honest look at obesity, diabetes, and hormonal disorders among American teenagers. Question: have we turned ourselves into that same broiler population? One that grows fast, reproduces fast, and dies fast, without ever stopping to ask who set up this system and why. The pineal gland and calcification. There's a small but extremely interesting organ in the center of your brain, the epiphysis, or pineal gland. Ancient civilizations, Egyptians, Romans, Hindus, called it the third eye. They saw it as an antenna, a receiver for subtle fields, intuition, connection to the planetary information network. Modern research shows that by age 30, most people's pineal glands are calcified, turned into tiny stones. Here's a theory you won't find in official textbooks. Modern diets, packed with synthetic additives, fluoridated water, and processed grains, accelerate this process. Highly refined white flour lacks trace minerals, but contains compounds that bind calcium and deposit it where it doesn't belong. Why would the system want humans with a disconnected antenna? Ask yourself. A person with a functioning third eye is someone who can sense lies, see hidden patterns, and resist the mass hypnosis of TV and advertising. A clear-minded person is much harder to control. You can't make them vote against their own interests or get excited about garbage food. So for the last 100 years or so, they've been diligently clogging that channel through your plate. Control through grain silos. Notice a simple but uncomfortable correlation. In the U.S. South, Europe, China, and India, tax systems, standing armies, bureaucracies, and police control all arose in places where grain agriculture existed. Why? Because grain can be stored, counted, seized, rationed, taxed, stockpiled, and artificially made scarce. You can't do that with a hunter or a herder. A forest or a pasture can't be monopolized the way a grain elevator can. Nomadic peoples were always either wiped out or forcibly settled, not because they were primitive, but because a nomad can't be controlled through hunger. They don't have a grain bin you can take away. Switching to bread wasn't just a dietary change, it was a switch to total accounting and control. Not because bread is healthier than fish or meat, but because it's more convenient for managing large populations. Ever heard the phrase bread riots? They were crushed with particular brutality, because cutting off access to grain meant cutting off the very possibility of survival for millions. Old maps and lost technologies. Look at ancient maps, like maps of Tartaria, Great Scythia, or early 18th century America. You won't see endless wheat, corn, or rice fields. You see forests, cities, pastures, rivers. Wheat was local, sometimes even ritual, not a global monocrop like today. Mass adoption of bread as a daily staple is a relatively recent phenomenon, and it coincides in time with the destruction of alternative knowledge and technologies. Did you know we still can't replicate the polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, or the granite embankments in St. Petersburg, with the same precision? Modern CNC machines can cut granite, but the tool marks look different. Our tools leave different vibrations, different traces. There's a theory that old technologies required a different level of consciousness and a different lifespan. You can't train that level of engineer in 20 years. You'd need 100 years just to master the basics. A short life is a safety lock. They don't give us time to become masters at the level of gods. 8. Why doctors don't say stop eating bread. Have you ever heard a doctor, even a good one, say this? Cut out all flour and all yeast for 3 months, then let's see what's left of your symptoms. Rarely. 9 times out of 10 they'll write you a prescription. Acid blockers for heartburn, simethicone for bloating, antidepressants for fatigue, stimulants or weight loss drugs for excess weight. The reason is simple and unpleasant. The U.S. self-healthcare system isn't built on preventive medicine or root cause resolution. It's built on treating consequences. A chronically ill patient who buys meds for years, sees doctors, runs tests, gets procedures, is far more profitable than a healthy person, many times more profitable. That's a harsh economic reality you can verify just by looking at healthcare and insurance prices. And bread with industrial yeast is one of the key mechanisms that keeps that chronic cycle going, because it creates low-grade inflammation that, over years, becomes a diagnosis, and a diagnosis is a lifelong revenue stream. School lunches and habits built from childhood. We need to talk about where it all starts. In U.S. South public schools, the National School Lunch Program feeds millions of kids every day. A standard meal, white flour pizza, corn chips, sweet chocolate milk, dessert. Protein is often low quality. Fiber is nearly zero. Yeast and sugar are maxed out. Why is this allowed? Because the U.S. Department of Agriculture is interested in offloading surplus corn, wheat, and soy, and kids get hooked on the taste. Soft, sweetish, fast-absorbing. The school cafeteria shapes lifelong eating habits. If you're raised on dough and sugar, then as an adult, vegetables and plain meat will taste bland, like not real food. That's not an accident. It's flavor engineering perfected over the last 50 years. A simple experiment. You can run this yourself. Starting tomorrow morning, remove bread, pasta, pizza, burger buns, crackers, cookies, and all baked goods for 3 days. Don't replace them with gluten-free versions from the same store. Those are often even more chemical-laden. Cut out everything made from milled grain with yeast. By day 2 or 3, many people get headaches, irritability, sugar cravings, and a panicky feeling of, I'm not getting full. It feels like mild withdrawal, like a mild detox. Your body is weaning off the constant yeast background and the endogenous ethanol. Your gut flora is reorganizing, and that's exactly when most people give in. They go to the fridge for a roll because the discomfort feels unbearable. But if you make it to day 4 or 5, many people notice something strange. Their head feels clearer. The morning fog lifts. Dreams feel more vivid. The usual post-meal heaviness and sleepiness disappear. You can eat a real meal, meat, vegetables, eggs, and not want to nap. You want to work or go for a walk. Ask yourself honestly what you've considered normal your whole life. Afternoon sleepiness, brain fog, snack dependence, nightly sugar cravings. Is that really your natural state? Or is it the result of a diet you never chose, but that was chosen for you? You don't have to believe a single word in this video. You can find 10 dietitians who'll tell you bread is safe, and 10 industry-funded studies to back them up. But you can run one simple, free, honest test. 7 days without wheat, an industrial yeast. Not for a trend, not for weight loss, not for Instagram likes, for yourself, for your health, for your future self. Because your body is the only machine you'll ever have, and only you decide what fuel goes into it. If cutting out bread changes how you feel, then ask the next question. Why did no one tell you this before? And who benefits from you continuing to eat something that makes you sleepy, addicted, and chronically sick? If you want to get to the bottom of it, subscribe. And remember, nobody hides the truth. Most people just don't want to see it.